You can't come to my wedding, Elena. I had the phone on speaker, wedged between a stack of cargo manifests, and a cold cup of coffee on my desk at Miami International, and for a second I genuinely thought I'd misheard him over the whine of a 777 taxiing past my window. Say that again. Chloe's family is old money. Palm Beach money. Her father owns half the real estate on Brickell Avenue, Elena. They're going to have a state senator there. And you're going to show up talking about fuel logistics and cargo manifests, and it's going to make us look, he paused, like he'd rehearsed getting to this word and still couldn't quite land it, small. I'm 34. I direct flight logistics for a private aviation firm that handles emergency medical transports, celebrity charters, and cargo reroutes when hurricanes shut down half the Gulf Coast. 4 years ago I rerouted 11 aircraft in under 5 hours during a category 4 landfall without losing a single shipment or missing a single transplant window. Nobody who has ever seen me work calls me small. My own brother has just never seen me work. Julian. I kept my voice level, the same tone I use when a pilot's voice starts climbing on the radio. I paid the security deposit on that venue. That's not the point. $25,000. On my corporate card, under my name, because Marcus gave me a vendor discount as a favor. That is extremely the point. I'll pay you back after the wedding. Don't make this about money. Chloe wants the day to be perfect, and perfect doesn't include, he stopped himself again. Doesn't include me. I'm sorry. I am. But Chloe was firm about the list. Her parents are meeting people who could change the entire trajectory of my career. The channel's about to cross 2 million subscribers, Elena, and Robert Sterling knows people at 3 different networks. This is bigger than family stuff. On my desk sat a photo I keep in a cheap frame, the two of us at 16 and 20, me holding a torque wrench beside a rust-eaten Mustang, Julian grinning at the camera like the car had restored itself. I'd spent 4 years and most of my 20s rebuilding that engine block by block in our grandfather's garage. Julian had spent those same 4 years telling people at parties he'd inherited it. Understood, I said. He exhaled, relief audible, like I'd lifted something off him. Thank you for not making this weird. I knew you'd get it. I did not get it. But I've learned that the people who explain themselves the least tend to be planning the most, and I wasn't going to hand Julian a fight he could later describe to Chloe's family as me being difficult. So I said goodbye, hung up, and sat completely still for 11 minutes while 3 departure alerts blinked unanswered on my monitor. Then I opened my email and pulled up the confirmation from Sapphire Cliff Estate. My name is Elena Vance, and 3 days before my brother's wedding, I still believed the worst thing he'd ever do to me was forget my birthday. I should be honest about something, because this isn't a story about a perfect woman wronged by a cartoon villain. I have a temper I keep on a short leash and a memory that doesn't forgive on schedule. I once went for months without speaking to our mother over a single comment about my lifestyle choices, meaning the fact that I live alone and don't narrate my personal life for family dinners. Julian has always known exactly how far to push before I go quiet instead of loud, and he has always preferred me quiet, because quiet is easier to walk past. What Julian never bothered to learn was how I actually spend my days. I don't just book flights. I manage vendor contracts, deposit structures, and cancellation clauses for a company whose clients cannot survive delays, disputes, or bad press. I read fine print for a living, and I've spent a decade cultivating relationships with venue managers across South Florida, because half my job is knowing exactly who owes me a favor when someone needs the impossible done in 48 hours. Marcus Feldman, events director at Sapphire Cliff Estate, owed me one. 8 months earlier I'd arranged an emergency medevac charter out of Boston for his daughter's transplant team, when a commercial flight got grounded by weather over the Carolinas. He'd told me more than once that if I ever needed anything from the estate, I only had to ask. I typed the email before I let myself think too hard about it. * Marcus, I need to cancel the Van Sterling booking for the 14th. Full refund to the card on file, ending 4471. I know this is short notice and I'll owe you one. Can you confirm today, asterisk? His reply landed 9 minutes later. Asterisk Elena, done. Refund processed. Sorry to hear things didn't work out. Let me know if you need anything else, asterisk. $25,000 back in my account by end of day. The cliffside venue Julian had spent 6 months bragging about on his channel, the one he'd called, on camera, the most exclusive property in Florida, booked through my connections, no longer existed for his wedding. I want to say I felt satisfied. What I actually felt was closer to clarity, the kind you get watching an instrument panel finally make sense mid-crisis. Because canceling a venue is a logistics problem, and logistics problems are the one thing I always solve. But underneath it, something else kept surfacing, a comment Julian made 2 months earlier at our parents' anniversary dinner, half drunk, laughing about how Robert Sterling had asked him point-blank what he did for a living. I told him I run a media consulting firm, Julian said, refilling his wine without looking at anyone. Which technically, the channel kind of is. I'd let it go that night. Julian's channel, 300,000 subscribers watching him rate watches and review supercars he doesn't own, generates content, not income, not enough to cover the Fisher Island apartment or the tab he apparently keeps running from Cipriani to his own dentist's office. I knew this because 6 weeks earlier our mother had asked me, quietly, whether I could help him out with something he owed a private lender. $18,000. I said no. She never asked again, but I saw the look she gave me after, like I'd failed a test I hadn't known I was taking. I opened my banking app and scrolled to the notes I'd kept from that conversation. I'd never sent Julian the money. But I'd pulled the loan documentation myself back then, quietly, trying to decide whether it was something I could settle without him ever knowing. $18,400. 91 days overdue. Attached to his name, his signature, his social. I thought about Robert Sterling across some marina dinner table, believing he was vetting a future son-in-law who ran a legitimate company. I thought about Chloe, 26, planning a wedding with a man who'd told her the Mustang in his engagement photos was a birthday gift from his father, when the truth was I'd let him drive it exactly once, for exactly one photo shoot, on the condition he return it to my garage by Sunday night. I am not a cruel person. I need that understood before anything else happens in this story. But I've spent my career learning that the people who lie most convincingly are always the ones nobody has ever asked to show their paperwork. So I attached the loan documents to a new email, addressed to a contact I'd saved from the Sterling Realty Group website months earlier, because when Julian first started dating Chloe, I did what I always do with anyone about to become family. I looked him up too. Subject line, regarding Julian Vance's outstanding accounts. My cursor sat over the send button for almost a full minute. Then my phone buzzed against the desk, my mother, 3 days before the wedding I was no longer invited to. Asterisk, can you please call Julian and apologize? He said you're being cold about all this. Family should support each other. Please don't ruin this for him, asterisk. I read it twice. I hit send. I want you to understand exactly what I knew in that moment, and what I didn't, because it matters for everything that happens next. I knew Robert Sterling would open that email within the hour, a man who checks his phone at every red light, based on 3 separate meetings I'd sat through years earlier when my firm handled his corporate charters. I knew he wouldn't confront Julian directly. Men like him confirm first, quietly, before they let anyone watch them react. What I didn't know was that Marcus Feldman, ever the professional, had already logged the cancellation in the estate's shared vendor system, the same system Chloe's wedding planner accessed daily, because Sapphire Cliff required every planner to sync directly with venue operations. Which meant that somewhere in the next 20 minutes, a wedding planner in Coral Gables was going to open her laptop, see a booking flag cancelled, refund issued, and pick up her phone to ask Chloe a question nobody in that family was prepared to answer. I closed my laptop, drove home, and parked the Mustang in my garage exactly where it belonged. I had no idea, pulling the cover over that car, that within 48 hours 3 different people would be trying to reach me at once, and that only one of them would still be speaking to me by the time this was over. My phone started ringing at 6:47 the next morning, before I'd even poured coffee. Julian. I let it go to voicemail once, then twice, then answered on the third round because I had a 9 a.m. call with a client rerouting a cargo shipment out of Fort Lauderdale, and I needed him off my line before then. What did you do? His voice wasn't loud. That was the first thing that told me how bad it actually was. Julian yells when he's annoyed. This was quieter than that. Good morning to you too. Marcus Feldman called the wedding planner at 11 last night. 11 at night, Elena. Told her the booking got cancelled and refunded. Do you understand what that did? Chloe's mother found out we lost the venue 3 days before 300 people are supposed to show up. I paid for that venue. I'm allowed to cancel what I paid for. You could have talked to me first. I did talk to you first. Yesterday. You told me I wasn't good enough to be in the room. Silence on the line. I could hear him breathing, the particular rhythm he gets when he's deciding whether to escalate or backpedal. Julian has never been good at reading a room he's actually in, only the ones he's performing for. Fine, he said finally. Fine. I'll figure something out. I always figure something out. That should have been the end of it. I had a shipment to reroute, 6 pallets of pharmaceutical-grade insulin sitting on a tarmac with a 4-hour cold chain window closing fast, and I did not have the bandwidth to keep managing my brother's crisis alongside an actual one. So I hung up, handled the shipment, got the insulin airborne with 11 minutes to spare, and didn't think about Julian again until 1:15 p.m., when my mother called. Elena. What is wrong with you? I set my phone on speaker and kept typing an email to a customs broker in Nassau. I am at work, Mom. Chloe's mother called me sobbing. Sobbing, Elena. Do you have any idea what you've done to that family's reputation? Robert Sterling is talking about pulling out of some business deal because of an email you sent him. I stopped typing. What email? Don't play games with me. Julian said you sent something to Chloe's father. Financial records, apparently. Private things that have nothing to do with the wedding. So Robert Sterling hadn't gone quiet after all. Or he had, for exactly as long as it took him to decide what to do with what I'd sent him, and what he'd decided was to make a phone call that clearly wasn't to me. Julian owes $18,000 to a private lender, I said. 91 days overdue as of the email I sent. That's not a secret I invented, Mom. That's a fact I have documentation for. Why would you have that documentation? Because you asked me to look into it 6 weeks ago. You asked if I could help him. I told you no. I never told you I deleted what I found. The silence that followed lasted long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. You're punishing him, she said finally, her voice smaller now, because he didn't invite you to his wedding. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm declining to fund a lie. It's not your business what he told Chloe's family. It became my business the moment his lie was financed by my venue deposit and driven around in my car. Elena. I have a call in 4 minutes, Mom. I have to go. I hung up before she could answer, which I recognize now as its own kind of cowardice, but I didn't have room that day for the version of this conversation where I had to explain, again, why the eldest daughter who pays her own way is somehow always the villain when the younger son runs out of runway. The thing about my job, the actual reason I'm good at it, is that I don't panic when a system fails. Cargo gets rerouted. Flights get grounded. Cold chains break. My job is to look at a collapsing situation and find the version of it that still lands intact. I'd spent the whole afternoon doing exactly that for a client's shipment, and around 4 p.m., sitting in the quiet after the crisis resolved, I finally let myself think clearly about my own. Julian had a wedding in 2 days and no venue. He'd need a new one fast, and in Miami that meant paying triple for availability on short notice, money he didn't have, not with $18,000 already circling him like a shark that had just tasted blood. Which meant one of two things was about to happen. Either the wedding collapsed entirely, or someone else was about to quietly cover the gap. I found out which one at 7:40 that evening, in a text from my father, who almost never texts me directly. Robert Sterling is letting them use one of his properties. The old cliffside house on Fisher Island Drive. Photographers coming tomorrow for promo shots. Your mother would like you to reconsider the loan situation before things get worse. Please call her, I read that message 3 times. Robert Sterling, a man who'd just received documented proof that his future son-in-law was 91 days delinquent on an $18,000 debt he'd lied about to his daughter, was solving Julian's venue problem for him. Not confronting him. Not canceling the wedding. Solving it. That told me something I hadn't fully understood the day before, sitting in my office feeling like I'd just detonated something. Robert Sterling wasn't the kind of man who blows up a wedding over a bad debt. He was the kind of man who quietly absorbs the problem, keeps his daughter happy, and files the information away for exactly the moment it becomes useful, a negotiating chip, a piece of leverage he could deploy whenever it served him. Which meant Julian wasn't in the clear. He'd just traded one creditor for a much more dangerous one. I should have left it there. I want to be honest that I considered leaving it there, that some quieter part of me thought maybe watching Julian slowly discover what he'd walked into was punishment enough. Then I opened Instagram, out of habit more than anything, and saw the post Julian had put up 40 minutes earlier. A photo of the Mustang, my Mustang, parked in front of the Fisher Island house, top down, golden hour light hitting the black paint exactly the way it does when the restoration work is done right. The caption read, *new venue, same energy. Can't wait to drive my girl down the aisle in style. 48 hours, baby, 61,000 likes already. Comments full of fire emojis and questions about the car's engine specs, which Julian was answering in the comments with numbers I recognized as completely made up. He hadn't asked me. He'd taken the car out of my garage. I keep a spare key hidden in the kitchen for emergencies, a key he clearly still remembered the location of, without a single text, a single call, a single word. I sat there for a long moment looking at that photo, and something in me that had been operating on logistics and containment for 2 full days finally shifted into something colder and more specific. This wasn't about a wedding invitation anymore. This had never really been about the invitation. It was about a pattern I'd spent 34 years quietly documenting without admitting to myself that's what I was doing. Every time Julian took something of mine and made it his story, every time our parents watched him do it and called me difficult for noticing. I picked up my phone and opened the tracking app connected to the Mustang's onboard system, the one I'd installed 2 years earlier after someone broke into a client's garage 3 streets from mine and stripped a '67 Corvette for parts. I'd never needed it for anything but peace of mind. The blinking dot sat exactly where the photo suggested, Fisher Island Drive, GPS coordinates locked, engine off. I didn't do anything that night. I want that on record. I closed the app, closed my laptop, and lay awake until almost 2 a.m. thinking about my grandfather, who left that car to both of us with a single instruction written into his will that I'd never told Julian about, because I'd never needed to until now. The car goes to whichever of them still has it running when I'm gone. I'd read that line 100 times over the years and assumed it was sentimental, an old man's way of saying he trusted me to keep the engine alive. It had never once occurred to me, until that night, staring at a photo of my car parked outside a stranger's mansion with my brother's fingerprints all over a lie, that my grandfather might have meant something far more literal. At 2:14 a.m., I finally understood what I was going to do about it, and for the first time in 3 days, I fell asleep without setting an alarm. I wouldn't need one. Some mornings arrive on their own schedule. I woke up before sunrise without an alarm, which almost never happens to me, and lay there for a moment letting the plan settle into something concrete, instead of the loose shape it had been at 2 a.m. Here is what I knew by 6 o'clock that morning. Julian had taken my car without asking. He'd posted it publicly, tagged the location, and was telling 300,000 people it was a gift from a father who had never given him anything more expensive than advice he didn't take. He had 48 hours until he tried to drive it down an aisle in front of Robert Sterling, a man now sitting on documentation that could end my brother's engagement with one phone call he apparently wasn't in a hurry to make. And I had a will clause I'd never mentioned to anyone, sitting in a safe deposit box at a bank on Brickell, that made the car mine to reclaim whenever I chose. I called the towing company at 7 a.m. sharp, Coastal Recovery Services, a company I'd used twice before for clients whose classic cars needed transport between shows. I knew the owner, Danny Reyes, well enough that he picked up on the second ring. Elena. Long time. What do you need? A flatbed. Today, if you can manage it. I need to recover a vehicle registered in my name from a private residence on Fisher Island. Recover, meaning? Meaning it's my car, my registration, my title, and the person currently in possession of it doesn't have permission to keep it there. Danny went quiet for a second. You got documentation. Titles in my name. Registrations in my name. Insurance is in my name. I can email you everything before you leave the yard. And you're sure about this? Fisher Island's not exactly a place where things go quiet. That was, I realized, precisely why I wanted it there and not anywhere else. I'm sure, I said. There's a photo shoot happening sometime today or tomorrow. I want you there when it's happening, not before, not after. I'll text you the exact time once I confirm it. That's a specific request. I'm a specific person, Danny. He laughed, the short kind that means someone's decided not to ask more questions. I'll have Marco run it. He's done repossessions for banks before, knows how to keep things clean and legal. You want him quiet, or you want him seen? I thought about that question longer than it probably deserved. Seen, I said. Very much seen. Confirming the timing wasn't difficult. Julian's own Instagram had already told most of it, a story posted at 8 a.m. showing a rack of garment bags, and the caption * final photo shoot before the big day, official wedding announcement drops tonight. * I didn't need surveillance. I needed patience and a working knowledge of how event photographers schedule golden hour, which in Miami in October meant somewhere between 5:15 and 6 p.m., when the light hits the water off Fisher Island exactly the way every wedding photographer in South Florida angles for. I texted Danny at 4:30. * between 5 and 6. Confirmed location, Fisher Island Drive. I'll send the address, *. Copy that. Marco's already staged on the mainland side, ferry's 20 minutes out. We'll time it, *. I spent the rest of that afternoon doing something I hadn't expected myself to do, which was drive to the safe deposit box and pull the original will. I hadn't looked at it since the reading 4 years earlier, when grief had made every clause feel abstract, symbolic, the kind of thing lawyers include to sound official rather than mean anything. I read the line again in my grandfather's own handwriting, notarized and witnessed, sitting in a manila folder that had waited patiently for exactly this moment. The vehicle, a 1969 Ford Mustang GT Fastback, shall pass to whichever of my grandchildren, Elena Marie Vance or Julian Robert Vance, maintains registered ownership, active insurance, and physical possession of the vehicle for a continuous period of no less than 5 years from the date of this will. Should ownership or possession lapse or transfer at any point during that period, full and permanent title shall default to the other, *. I sat in my car in the bank parking garage and read it 3 times. I had maintained registration. I had maintained insurance. I had never, not once in 4 years, let the car leave my physical possession for longer than a single afternoon, and always with written text confirmation of return. Julian had just had it in his possession, off my property, without my consent, for going on 18 hours. I am not a lawyer. But I know enough about contracts and clauses from a decade of reading fine print for a living to understand that physical possession was about to become a very expensive word for my brother, and that the flatbed truck currently idling on a ferry toward Fisher Island wasn't just recovering a car. It was enforcing a will. I got the text from Marco at 5:52 p.m. * in position. They're doing photos on the lawn, cars parked front and center. Photographer, about 15 guests, some guy who looks like a wedding planner running around with a clipboard. You want me to move now or wait? Asterisk. I looked at the framed photo on my desk one more time, 16 and 20, wrench in my hand, engine in pieces, for years of Saturdays that Julian never once showed up for. Move now. I didn't watch it happen live. I want to be honest about that, because there's a version of this story where I'm standing somewhere in the background with a smug expression, and that's not what occurred. I was at my desk, waiting, refreshing nothing, doing the thing I do best under pressure, which is nothing at all until the outcome is confirmed. At 6:14 p.m., my phone rang. Julian. I let it ring twice before I answered, and when I did, I could hear wind, voices, someone crying in the background, and my brother's voice pitched somewhere between fury and panic that I had genuinely never heard from him before, not once in 30 years. Elena. Elena, you need to call this off right now. There's a truck here. There's a guy with a clipboard reading my registration over a loudspeaker in front of Chloe's entire family. What registration is he reading, Julian? Silence. The wind kept blowing into the microphone. Somewhere behind him, a woman's voice, not Chloe's, older, sharper, was asking someone, loudly, whose name was actually on the title. Elena, please. Please just tell them to stop. I'll do anything. I'll pay you back for everything, just make this stop before. And then the call didn't end so much as it got taken from him. I heard fumbling, the particular scrape of a phone changing hands, and a new voice came through, steady in a way that told me everything about who was now holding it. Elena Vance, the voice said. This is Chloe. I think you and I need to have a conversation that doesn't involve my fiancé. I sat up straighter in my chair. I'm listening, I said. Good, Chloe said. Because I just watched a stranger read my future husband's full legal name off a car title in front of my mother, and I have some questions I don't think Julian's going to answer honestly. Starting with the $18,000. I closed my eyes for a moment, and for the first time since the phone call 3 days earlier that started all of this, I let myself feel something close to relief. That, I said, is a very long conversation. Do you have somewhere private you can go? Chloe found somewhere private within 4 minutes. I could hear the wind cut out abruptly, replaced by the hollow acoustics of what I guessed was a pool house or a garage, someone's idea of privacy on a property with 11,000 square feet of nowhere quiet. Okay, she said. I'm alone. Talk. I've negotiated with airline executives during weather emergencies, with customs officials holding shipments hostage over paperwork technicalities, with grieving families trying to charter last-minute flights to say goodbye to someone who wouldn't make it through the night. I know how to deliver bad news to someone who isn't ready for it. The trick isn't softening it. The trick is sequencing it so the person receiving it can absorb one piece before the next one lands. 18 months ago, I said, Julian told our parents his channel was profitable enough to live on. It isn't. 6 weeks ago, our mother asked me to quietly pay off a debt he owes a private lender because he couldn't make it disappear himself. $18,400, 91 days overdue as of 2 days ago. I said no. I sent the documentation to your father instead, because I assumed he'd want to know before 300 people watched his daughter marry into it. Silence. Long enough that I checked the call was still connected. The car, Chloe said finally, her voice tighter now. He told me his dad gave it to him for his 30th birthday. Restored it himself in some garage upstate. I restored it. Over 4 years, most weekends, by myself. It's registered in my name. Julian asked to borrow it for exactly one photo shoot, on the condition he return it to my garage by Sunday. He didn't ask again. He took it from my house yesterday using a spare key he wasn't supposed to still have. So the truck is a repossession. Legal, documented, title in hand. I didn't do it to embarrass you at your photo shoot. I did it because I found out last night he'd taken it without asking, and I wasn't going to wait until your wedding day to find out whether he intended to give it back. Chloe didn't say anything for a while. I could hear her breathing, slow and deliberate, the sound of someone doing math they didn't want to be doing. "There's a wedding announcement dropping tonight," she said finally. "Press release, the whole thing." My mother's publicist arranged coverage with 2 lifestyle magazines. Julian told them he built a media consulting firm from nothing after leaving a corporate finance job. He told my father he had a 6-figure investment portfolio he wanted advice managing. "None of that is true," I said. "I can send you everything I sent your father, if you want to see it yourself instead of taking my word for it." "Send it." I did, right there on the call, forwarding the same documentation while she stayed on the line, and I listened to her go quiet in the particular way people go quiet when a story they've been telling themselves for 2 years finally stops holding its shape. "He cried," she said eventually, and I almost missed it, her voice had dropped so low. "When your truck showed up." "He didn't try to explain. He just kept saying you were doing this because you weren't invited. Like that was the whole story." "It's not," I said. "It's the version that was easiest to tell." "I need to go," Chloe said. "I have a lot of people out there asking me questions I don't have answers for yet." "I understand. Elena." She paused. "For what it's worth, I don't think this is really about the wedding for you either, is it?" I sat with that question longer than I expected to. "No," I said. "It's not." She hung up without saying goodbye, which I didn't take personally. Some conversations don't have a graceful exit, and I've learned not to expect one from people in the middle of watching their life reorganize itself in real time. The Instagram post went up at 9:40 that night, not from Julian's account, but from Chloe's, 240,000 followers, verified, the kind of account that doesn't post impulsively. Tonight was supposed to be our official wedding announcement. Instead I found out my fiancé lied to my family about his finances, his business, and a car that isn't his. The wedding is off. I don't have anything else to say right now except thank you to everyone reaching out, please give me some space, 300,000 comments within an hour. I didn't read them. I've never been the kind of person who finds satisfaction in watching someone else's public collapse, and I want to be clear that what I felt watching that post climb wasn't triumph. It was something closer to exhaustion, the particular tiredness that comes after a long shift when the crisis finally resolves and your body remembers it's allowed to stop bracing. My phone rang 4 times in the next 20 minutes. My mother, twice. My father, once. Julian, once, which I let go to voicemail because I genuinely didn't know yet what I wanted to say to him, and I've learned the hard way that answering out of guilt instead of clarity never goes well for anyone. The message he left was 90 seconds long. I listened to it twice. "Elena, it's me. I don't even know what to say. Chloe's gone. Her dad's talking about legal action over the loan thing, like I stole from him, which I didn't, I made some choices that got away from me. Mom and Dad think I should move back in with them for a while. I lost the car, I lost the venue, I don't have anywhere else to go right now. I know you're angry. I know I deserve this. I just need you to call me back." I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after it ended. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about getting exactly what you set out to get, the ledger doesn't actually balance the way you imagined it would. I'd wanted Julian to face consequences for a pattern he'd spent years building, the borrowed money, the borrowed credibility, the way he'd learned to treat my competence as a resource he could draw from without ever crediting the source. I got that. Chloe knew the truth now. Robert Sterling had his answers. The Mustang sat in my garage where it belonged, under its cover, engine cold and quiet. But I hadn't accounted for what it would feel like to hear my little brother's voice break on a voicemail, admitting for the first time in his adult life that he didn't have anywhere else to go. I thought about calling my mother back first, or my father, or even Julian directly. Instead I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder where I'd saved his loan documentation weeks earlier, the same folder I'd used to end his engagement, and I looked at it for a long time. $18,400. I had the money. I'd always had the money, that had never been the actual question, not when my mother first asked and not now. The question had never been whether I could afford to help him. It was whether helping him again would just be one more version of the same mistake our whole family had been making for 30 years, mistaking Julian's confidence for competence, and asking me, quietly, to cover the difference. I closed the laptop without deciding anything, which felt, for once, like the most honest choice available to me. At 11:50 p.m., a text came through from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it expecting a reporter, or a stranger who'd found my name somewhere in the wreckage of the story now spreading across social media. It was Robert Sterling. Ms. Vance. I'd like to speak with you directly, away from the family noise. There's a business matter I think you should hear about before you decide anything further regarding your brother. Are you available tomorrow morning? I read it 3 times, the same way I'd read everything else that week that mattered. I had no idea, typing my reply, that the conversation waiting for me the next morning would have almost nothing to do with Julian at all. Robert Sterling picked a coffee shop in Coconut Grove, not his office, not his home, neutral ground, the kind of choice that told me he'd thought carefully about optics before he thought about anything else. He was already seated when I arrived, a tablet open in front of him, 2 coffees ordered, 1 black, the way I take mine, which meant someone had briefed him on more than just my brother's finances. Ms. Vance. Thank you for coming. Elena's fine. Elena. He gestured to the seat across from him. I'll get to the point, because I imagine you've had a difficult week, and I don't want to waste your time. I run due diligence on everyone who enters my family's orbit. It's not personal, it's practice. I've built a career on knowing who I'm actually dealing with before I sign anything. I ran it on Julian 8 months ago, when he and Chloe got serious. And it came back clean enough to worry me more than if it had come back dirty. No real assets. No real income beyond ad revenue that fluctuates by 40% month to month. A business registered as an LLC with no filings, no employees, no actual operations beyond a ring light, and a rented apartment he can't really afford. He turned the tablet toward me. What it also showed me was you. I looked at the screen. A pulled report, my name at the top, employment history, the medevac charter for his transplant team 8 months earlier flagged in a footnote I hadn't expected anyone outside my company to have access to. I don't manage assets for individuals, I said carefully. I don't know what you're. I'm not asking you to manage my money, Elena. He almost smiled. I'm asking what it would take to get someone with your operational judgment onto the advisory side of a logistics fund I'm launching next quarter. Commercial real estate development, supply chain infrastructure across 3 ports. I need someone who understands crisis response at the level you clearly do, because I watched you dismantle my future son-in-law's entire fabricated life in under 72 hours using nothing but a phone and a tow truck, and I have never in 26 years of business seen anyone move that cleanly under that much family pressure. I sat back in my chair. Somewhere behind the caffeine and the exhaustion of the last week, something in me recalibrated. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a conversation about one. I don't make impulsive decisions, and I don't imagine you do either. But I'd be lying if I said the last 3 days weren't the most useful interview I've ever conducted without meaning to conduct one. I didn't answer right away. I thought about my current firm, the 11-hour days, the ceiling I'd quietly stopped pretending wasn't there 2 years ago when a man with half my tenure got promoted past me because he golfed with the right people. I thought about the version of my life where the skills I'd spent a decade sharpening in service of other people's emergencies finally got pointed at something that built equity instead of just preventing disaster. I'd want to see the fund structure before I said yes to anything I said. And I'd want it understood up front that I don't discuss my brother as part of this. Whatever comes next between him and your family, it doesn't touch this conversation. Robert Sterling nodded slowly, like that answer had confirmed something he'd already suspected about me. Agreed. Though for what it's worth, Chloe doesn't blame you. She's angry at Julian. She's grateful to you, in the strange way people are grateful to whoever hands them the truth even when the truth costs them something. I didn't call Julian back that day, or the next. I want to be honest about why. I wasn't punishing him anymore. I was simply, for the first time in longer than I could remember, prioritizing something that had nothing to do with managing the fallout of his choices. He called our parents' house home for 11 days before he found a small apartment near Doral, paid for, my mother told me carefully, by some savings, which I understood to mean money he'd finally had to actually earn instead of borrow. Chloe never spoke to him again, as far as I know. Robert Sterling never mentioned pursuing the loan legally, which told me everything about what he'd actually wanted out of the whole situation, not restitution, just information, the kind that let him make a decision he'd clearly already been circling for months before I forced his hand. 3 weeks after the tow truck pulled out of Fisher Island with my Mustang secured on its flatbed, I signed an advisory agreement with Sterling's fund. 6 weeks after that, my mother finally called to ask, not accuse, actually ask, why I'd sent the email in the first place. Because he took something that wasn't his and built a life out of pretending it was, I told her. And nobody in this family was ever going to stop him except me. She didn't have an answer to that. I didn't need one anymore. The Mustang sits in my garage now, exactly where it's supposed to be, engine running clean every time I turn the key, for years of Saturday mornings finally worth something more than a photograph in a cheap frame. I drive it myself now, most weekends, top down, nobody's story but my own writing in the passenger seat. Julian texts occasionally. Short things. Happy birthday, saw this and thought of you, I answer sometimes. I haven't decided yet what kind of relationship survives what happened between us, or whether one should. But I've stopped waiting for him to explain himself, and I've stopped needing him to. Some inheritances aren't about what gets left to you. They're about what you're finally willing to take back.